In our men's group at St. Michael's, we're studying Paul's letter to the Galatians. In chapter 2, we come to the confrontation between the two great apostles, Paul and Peter. At Antioch, Peter has withdrawn from table fellowship with the Gentile Christians when some Jews arrive, and he moves to eat with them. And Paul recognizes that the truth of the gospel is at stake. And he says he confronted Peter to his face. Now in our study, we're using a commentary by the late great London theologian and pastor John Stott, and here's something he says about this passage. When the issue between us is trivial, we must be as pliable as possible. But when the truth of the gospel is at stake, we must stand our ground. We thank God for Paul, who withstood Peter to his face, for Athanasius, who stood against the whole world when Christendom had embraced the Arian heresy, and for Luther, who dared to challenge even the papacy. Where are the men of this caliber today? Well, Stott wrote those words a half-century ago, and they reverberate today in our contemporary church. But we must point out that we are not completely without men of that caliber in the church today. Until a few years ago, we had Chuck Colson, and then the Christian author Eric Metaxas replaced him on the Breakpoint radio program and has done an excellent job of keeping the truth out there in front of the public. More recently, we have Russell Moore, the president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention. In that role, it's his job to set the tone for how Southern Baptist Christians live out their faith in the public square. Moore said recently that he has a problem celebrating the election of a politician whose life is scarcely an example of Christian witness. He was speaking, of course, of our new president, Donald Trump. Moore said that it would be to sin against my own conscience to vote for Trump, and for that he has come under attack from various powerful Southern Baptist leaders of churches and agencies, and we ask ourselves, what would be their motive? I can't think of one other than currying favor with a morally bankrupt rich man in a position of power. For shame. I can't even imagine that they want influence with him for the purpose of advancing the gospel. We went the moral majority route, didn't we? Well, when we think back on what our Lord did in terms of how we can turn our post-Christian nation back into a Christian nation, I think the only conclusion we can reach is that we've got to tell the truth. We've got to do the hard work of evangelism and discipleship. Our Lord didn't sit down for a chinwag with the Sanhedrin. He didn't throw bouquets at Pontius Pilate. He got out there and preached the saving truth of the gospel to the people. So, I want to hold up Russell Moore to men who pack off their wives and children to church on a Sunday morning. Christianity is too passive for them. Turning the other cheek, not for these guys. Well, you know what? We don't, or we shouldn't, when the truth of the gospel is at stake. Paul didn't. Russell Moore hasn't. If you really want to man up, brother, we can find a spot for you. Moore said, "For me to remain silent, rightly or wrongly, felt negligent. I have nothing but respect for a man who speaks out according to a biblically informed conscience. And I have respect for his decision to withhold his vote from either major party candidate. My wife came to the same decision. I voted for Donald Trump. I couldn't stomach the thought of a Supreme Court packed with Hillary Clinton nominees, and especially what that would mean for the cause of life. But supporting Trump at the polls doesn't mean I have to endorse his vulgarity in the public square. Christians don't condone what their Lord condemns. I've been saying that for some time now about homosexuality. I must say the same about fornication, which is equally a sin in God's eyes. Now, I've never met Russell Moore. I'd like to. I'd like to remind him of something another Southern Baptist said not so long ago, a fellow named Billy Graham. He said if he had his life to live it over again, he'd be an evangelical Anglican. Something to think about. We can find a spot for you too, Brother Moore. I'm Father Ed. Thanks for being with us on the Gospel Blog.